Hello, welcome to today's program, How to Ace Your Virtual Interview. My name is Donald Turner, I'm Director of Career Development at LaSalle University. We have quite a bit of information to cover, but as we begin this webinar, I want to first pause and acknowledge that with all we're going through at this moment in time and considering everything that's happening in our world, I really do appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to be here, and I'm sincerely hopeful that things will improve both in our country and in our community. Interviewing can be a challenging endeavor, but then when you add on top of this, trying to do it virtually, it can then somewhat feel overwhelming. One of the benefits of the pandemic is that we've all gotten a little more familiar with these online formats. We've been forced to in a relatively short time. I know that when I did my first webinar back in April, I felt a little uncomfortable, nervous with the format, but now a few months down the road, and I'm feeling a little bit more comfortable and confident, and yet at the same time, I know that there's still a lot more to learn. So I'll give you a few tips on how to perform well in virtual interviews. Some of the information will be valuable, even once we return to whatever normal will look like in the future of interviews. My goal is really to build your confidence. One thing I want you to think about in terms of interviewing is try to shift your mindset from thinking about an interview as I have to go in and brag about myself or sell yourself to really thinking about that experience as going and sharing information. You see, the interviewers, the company that's looking to make this hire, they want to hire someone, and yet they also need information to make an informed decision. So you don't necessarily need to think about it using a lot of flowery adjectives to describe how great and fantastic you are. This is probably true. However, it's really just about sharing information. It's about going in and sharing facts about what your experience and your skill set is that's relevant to the job that you're applying for. Having this mindset can relieve a lot of that anxiety that you might be feeling otherwise. However, this does not mean that you want to leave the whole process to chance. Preparation and practice, these are your keys to success. You know, I frequently hear from students and others that they're extremely nervous during interviews, which for a lot of people really ranks right up there with public speaking. One big mistake is going into the interview and just hoping for the best without really doing the things that might help reduce some of the anxiety and make you feel a little bit more prepared. So the tips I'm going to give you today are going to allow you to have just that confidence. You know, I can think back on my combined 20 plus years of staffing and recruiting and higher ed career advising, and I can probably count on one hand the number of people that have actually told me they love interviewing. For most of us, myself included, it's not one of our favorite things to do. So when we think about preparing, what do we do? What do we do about preparing? First, I want you to make sure that when you're preparing for an interview, whether it's virtual, whether it's in person or telephone, that you research the position and the organization. You see, you want your answers to be relevant to the job. You want them to be spot on. You want them to be on point. And it's hard to do that if you're unclear about what the position is, or you're unsure about the organization that you're applying to, what their services are, what their values are, what they're all about. So how can you go about doing this research? First, you want to analyze the job description. Go through the job description and really pull out all the different skills that they're talking about, all the different requirements. You see, sometimes when we're reviewing job description, what we're really doing is going through and saying, check, I can do this, check, I can do that. What you want to do though, with all those things you say you can do, is to think about what's your proof point? What's your example? What's your specific example that shows that you have that experience, that you have that skill set? Use the job description as a guide to help you prepare. You want to do the same thing with gathering information about the organization. You want to thoroughly review their website, use all the different aspects of it. You might want to look up the organization on their social media as well to see what they're putting out. If they're on LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter, what are they talking about? What types of values are they sharing? How do your experiences and your values align with theirs? Those are the types of things that you might want to bring out in the interview. On LinkedIn, you want to look and see if you have any connections to that particular company. Maybe you reach out to them, let them know that you have an interview coming up, and ask if they can offer you any kind of advice or insights into the organization. Where is it headed? What are the skills that are most valued there? Really dig deep and see what kind of information you can find out. When you're preparing for the interview, you also want to eliminate any unknowns. So when you're contacted by the recruiter to invite you for the interview, you want to ask some simple questions such as, how long will the interview be? Who will you be speaking or meeting with on that Zoom call? It can be very unsettling when you have an interview scheduled and you sign into that Zoom meeting and all of a sudden you see that there's 8 people staring back at you when you thought there was only going to be one. This can sometimes send your nerves right through the roof and affect how you perform. So eliminate some of those unknowns. You also want to gather some materials to have around you during the interview. No, you don't want to be looking down at your notes or filing or, leafing through your papers to find out that one great answer for the specific question that they just asked you. I would, however, recommend that you have available the resume that you submitted for the position, your cover letter and application if there was one, and then maybe a few notes of what you're going to want to communicate during the interview itself. You will also want to have 3 to 5 questions to ask that you've prepared ahead of time. So having those materials around you can be very helpful. You may end up not even having to look at them because you're so well prepared, but just knowing that they're there can serve as a sort of a security blanket so that if your mind goes completely blank, it does and it can happen, you've got something to refer back to. The other thing that I want you to do is prepare, uh, set your agenda. Now, yeah, that may seem a little strange sounding because you're thinking, what do you mean my agenda? The interviewers are going to determine what questions to ask, and that's certainly true. But after you, after doing your research and looking at the job description, understanding what the organization is about, analyzing how your background and experience fits with theirs, then you want to have some idea about what it is that you want to communicate during the interview. So that when the interview is concluded, what is it that you want to make sure that they know about you? So whether they ask a question about those things or not, you can weave those themes into your answers. Or at the end of the interview, they'll typically ask if you have anything to add or any questions for them. If there's one big piece of your background and experience that you believe is important and relevant to the job that you haven't had a chance to share, then that would be your time to share it. So think about what you want to communicate, what it is that you want to make sure that they know about you. You don't want to get off that call and say, man, I never got a chance to tell them this, or they never asked me that question. It's imperative, therefore, that you are prepared to bring that up if you believe it's really, really important. So some of those are some of the things that you can start to prepare. In addition, when we talk about virtual interviews, it's really important to set the stage. And many of you are getting a whole lot better at this as you continue to spend more and more time in Zoom meetings. But if I can, I want to mention just a couple specific things that you might want to do that will help you make your best impression. In terms of setting the stage, you want to have a clean and simple background. You don't want to have a bunch of stuff in the picture that's going to be a distraction. It's similar to what you might choose to wear, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but you want the focus to be on your words instead of, for example, all the little things that you have in your shelf behind you or what the titles of the books are that you have in the background. You want them focused instead on what you're saying. So a clean, simple background with a few distractions are always best. Now, depending on the setting that you're in, if you're in a household with other people or children, consider putting a note on the door that says, please do not disturb. I know sometimes it's challenging if you've got kids at home and no one there to watch them, but this might be the one time you put them in front of their favorite video and or make some kind of bargain with them about, being quiet for a period of time. Try to eliminate those potential distractions. If you think it's necessary, put a note in your front door about ringing the bell or knocking on the door. With all the deliveries many of us are getting these days, you don't want that loud bang, bang, bang from the Amazon delivery guy going on while you're right in the middle of your interview. It's also important to think about the lighting. Ideally, you'll be able to have the lighting facing toward you. If you have lighting coming from behind you, that puts your face in a shadow, which then makes it difficult to see you, and especially difficult to see your facial expressions, which are going to be really important in the interview. Because there's not going to be a lot of those social cues, you're going to want to make sure that people can see your facial expressions. So try to have the lighting pointed directly toward you. You might even practice a little bit setting up a Zoom meeting with someone else, or if you don't have the capability, then maybe do FaceTime. Try some different setups, some different lighting with someone else so they can give you some good feedback on whether or not they can see you and how your virtual presence is coming across. Also, and this is important too, you want to test your technology. This is one of those things that you can do when they call for the interviews to make sure that you know what platform they'll be using. Is it going to be Zoom? Will it be WebEx? Is it some other platform that you're unfamiliar with? If you're unfamiliar with the platform they'll be using, be sure to have it downloaded far in advance of your scheduled interview time so that you can practice with it. You can watch, for example, some YouTube videos on how best to use it so that you're not messing with the technology and trying to figure things out during the interview. Make sure that you have a professional username so that if you just entered your initials way back when, you can go back and enter your full name in the Zoom profile. It might also be a good idea to upload a professional headshot. Also, be sure to check your microphone beforehand as well and make sure that everything is working well. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about dress. When you go into an interview, you're going to dress professionally, period, unless, of course, otherwise instructed. For a virtual interview, I would highly recommend that you get fully dressed. Don't leave the bottom half to chance because you never know when something might go wrong. For example, you spill your coffee or you need to get up really quickly and you don't want to be feeling like, uh-oh, I can't stand up because I got my shorts on or I'm still in my pajama bottoms. So just make sure that you're fully dressed. The other advantage of this is that it can really help build your confidence. You're fully dressed and you're putting your most professional image forward. You want to wear something that's not too busy, something that will not detract from your face and from your words. So now is not the time to make that big fashion statement or wear excessive jewelry. Do keep it simple. Now, here's a tip. Blues are really good on virtual calls. So if you look good in blue, you might lean towards something like that. I know it's a challenge. It can be a challenge at this point because we're still in the somewhat hotter weather. So depending on your air conditioning, what that's like, and how nervous you get during an interview, then wearing a jacket, a tie, those kinds of things during an interview can really get pretty overheated. One thing that you might want to do is start off with a jacket or a blazer. And if things get too warm, it's completely fine to say, hey guys, if you don't mind, it's a little warm, and I'm going to take my coat off. We've been experiencing high humidity here, and we really have, and I really don't think anyone's going to mind if you want to take your coat off. So also in regards to the area of setting the stage, I want to touch briefly on virtual backgrounds. And I mentioned having a clean, non-distracting background, and this is true, but you can also do a virtual background. The only thing, however, I would say is that you be sure to practice with it because you want to make sure that if you're using a background that you stay out in front of it so that you don't, fade back into it, and those that you're meeting with, they can only see half your face or those sorts of things. Virtual backgrounds can be a really great way to go because then you don't have to worry about how clean your background is. Or, for example, the only good place in the house that you get good internet is in the kitchen, and you don't want that to be your background for the interview, correct? So, but however way you go, be sure to do a trial run with all of this. You can do that with a friend, with a family member, or a colleague. The Career Center, of course, you can contact us, and we'll be happy to do a mock interview with you. And I'll talk more about that shortly. You just really want to make sure that you're comfortable with everything and that everything looks good. Doing so will help you feel better and more ease when you log into that interview. Now, if you wear makeup, you might think about wearing it a little heavier when you're on camera. That's something that all broadcast people know about. And apparently, and I can't give you firsthand information on this, sorry, apparently makeup doesn't show up quite as much or quite as well when you're on camera. So that's something that you can kind of test that out a little bit. But of course, too, you don't want to overdo it, but in order to get the look that you want for your interview, then consider putting it on a little bit heavier than usual. Also, another little detail, you make sure that your glasses are clean so that your lenses are not visibly smudged. Remember, your goal here is to do everything within your control to convey a professional image. Okay, now by now you might be saying, all right, enough already with the preparation. Let's get to the interview part. Fair enough. But if I may, I just want to stress preparation is key to your interview. Even though the interview might only be 30 or 45 minutes, the amount of time that you spend preparing should be triple that. So that's why I'm spending so much time on preparation, because it's so important to your overall success. Now, once you've got your stage set, you've got your outfit picked out, you've done some practice and everything is looking good, then you want to anticipate questions. You want to go through the job announcement and begin to think about questions they might ask you that relate to your skills and experience. In addition to, in addition, what you want to think about are commonly asked interview questions. Now there's a lot of resources out there that will list commonly asked interview questions, and I've also uploaded some lists in our resources section of the Handshake platform for students and alumni to access. You can also find interview questions on LinkedIn. Actually, you know what? They have a great interview preparation section. Additionally, you want to search Glassdoor. You can even on glassdoor.com, you can even look at questions that have been asked at a particular company that you're interviewing with. This can be extremely valuable. So you want to anticipate what kinds of questions they might ask you and prepare your answers for those. Um, and prepare not only just how much experience you have and where you've done that, but also prepare success stories that show specific examples of when you've done that, uh, how and where you've utilized that particular skill. You want to practice out loud. It's one thing to sit down and anticipate questions and write those down, um, how you might answer those, but you really want to practice out loud. How we speak is a little different than how we write or certainly how we think. And we may think if they ask me about, how to process a payroll, you might be thinking, I do that every month or I do it every 2 weeks. I know how to do that with my eyes closed. But then when you get in an interview and they say, tell us about the process that you use to manage payroll, sometimes you kind of go blank or you start talking about this and then, but then I do that. And then you're like, wait, where was I heading with that? And it comes out all jumbled, or you find yourself just rambling. So by practicing out loud, you can take all your experience and get it into a nice, concise format that's logical and that hits on the key points that you want to communicate during the interview. When you're answering an interview question, if you're talking for more than 2 minutes, you're probably rambling. You can convey a lot of information in 2 minutes. And so one of the advantages of practicing out loud is that you can time yourself. And if you find that your answer is 5, 6, 8 minutes, 10 minutes long to a fairly straightforward question, then you know you've got to go back and streamline it, right? So ideally, again, you want to do a mock interview with a career center or colleague or someone else. And in terms of preparing for a virtual interview, maybe even do that over Zoom so that you get the experience, you have that experience of what it feels like. Now, as a reminder, all this preparation is great and you definitely want to do that, but unlike studying for a final, you do not want to wait until the last minute. You don't want to cram for an interview the night before. You don't want to stay up all night and go into the interview exhausted with dark circles under your eyes and having had to drink 10 cups of coffee just to stay awake for the interview. That's not going to allow you to do your best. My recommendation is that you begin your preparation in advance, and the night before, you spend some time relaxing. Whatever it is that you do that brings you calm, maybe it's some yoga, going for a long walk, whatever that is, give yourself that space to just kind of relax and breathe so that you get a good solid night's sleep before your interview. So I know we're talking about virtual interviews, and when you think about virtual interviews, you often think about video interviews. But even before the pandemic, telephone interviews were well on their way to becoming the norm. So everything that we've talked about until now, with the exception, that is, of setting the stage, applies to phone interviews. One thing that you want to consider is to print a photo of your interviewer or even just a smiling, friendly face and put that in front of you while you're doing the interview. You see, sometimes when we're doing a phone interview or just talking on the phone, we tend to become a little monotone, and it's because we're not getting those visual cues. And having a picture there uh, can help. If you have a photo of the interviewer in front of you, that's going to encourage you to smile, to put out some of those facial expressions, which the other person can't see them. It's still going to be communicated in your tone of voice. You know, some people actually stand in front of the mirror for their phone interview. It's the same kind of idea, that so that you think that you're talking with someone. When you're on the phone interview, be sure to let the interviewer interrupt you. For instance, if you're talking and you hear them start talking too, then finish your sentence fairly quickly and let them go forward. It could be that they're starting to talk because they've heard enough and they're ready to move on. Again, there's a tendency for us to ramble during phone calls, during phone interviews, because we have none of those social cues to pick up on, and that maybe they've heard enough, maybe they're ready to move on. So on the phone, you want to be sure that you're speaking clearly, that you slow down your speech, because again, there's none of those visual cues. Okay, so here I want to talk about another type of virtual interview that's just now emerging. Actually, it's been emerging for some time. We really haven't seen a lot of these, but there are some companies using this type of interview. And I think as we move forward, given the physical distancing guidelines that are enforced right now, we may see even more of this. So, what is this on-demand video interview? The employer creates questions, and then they send out a link with those questions to the candidate. Typically, these are sent via email. Then the candidate would click on that link, and through the computer or phone would reply to the questions. Typically, you have 24/7 access to the questions, but they will also establish a deadline for when you have to answer the questions, and that's usually timed. For example, so it may say you're going to have 30 seconds to answer each question, or you have up to a minute to answer each question, and then oftentimes they will give you a practice run. Sometimes they will. As you can imagine, this can be somewhat of a challenge as well, because you're really just talking to yourself. Once you click on the link, you'll be given a set of questions. In some instances, you're given a practice one. To begin, you click the button or the link, which activates the recording, and you give answers to the questions. Once you complete this, you'll submit your recorded answers, and someone from the company reviews your video answers. Like any virtual interview, however, you want to dress appropriately. You want to be clear, you want to be concise, and even though you may have a short amount of time, you want to bring in some specific examples. So this is just a heads up. Be on the lookout for this new emerging type of virtual interview. All right. So even though we've already talked about getting ahead of some of those unknowns, there will always be some unknowns with interviewing. And even though you prepare and you anticipate questions and you research the company, there's still going to be some things that you just don't know what to expect. This is one of my favorite cartoons, which kind of illustrates this. It's a favorite cartoon about interviewing, and this is what someone imagined that an IKEA job interview would look like. So the person comes into the interview, and the interviewer says, "Have a seat." But first, they've got to build their seat. Seems like it would be very appropriate for an IKEA job interview, right? So now I don't know about you, but I definitely would not pass this test. All right, on to something a little bit more serious. Let's talk a little bit about what you should be doing during the interview. So during the interview, you want to make a great first impression, kind of like a digital handshake, if you will. So how do you do that? The first 5 seconds are going to be key. For better or for worse, humans make those first impressions in a matter of seconds. That's just the way our minds work. We see something and we start trying to make sense of it. And so usually that begins within the first 5, 8 seconds. So as you join the call or the Zoom meeting, you want to be prepared and ready, leaning forward, smiling, being engaged. Your body language and nonverbal communication is really going to be important in the video interview. You want to make eye contact, and that, of course, doesn't mean looking down at the monitor to see all the people that are on the call. It means looking directly at the camera. That's why it can be somewhat helpful to put a picture up there by the camera so you don't feel like you're just staring at a little green or white light or whatever color your light is, but that you're actually looking at someone during the interview. Because you see, eye contact is really important, and you don't want to be like looking up here, looking over there. You don't want to be looking ever somewhere else. You want to be looking straight at someone. You also want to speak clearly, as we've discussed before. You want to listen carefully. You want to hear everything that they're asking you and everything that's being said. During the interview, you want to share your accomplishments and your success stories, as this will be key in making you stand out in the interview. You want to you want to be sure that you ask questions, and even though this is a virtual interview, they will typically give you the opportunity to ask some questions at the end of the interview or add anything that you might want to add. And you definitely want to have prepared maybe as many as 6 or 7 questions. Not that you'll want to ask that many questions, especially on your first interview, but you have 3 to 5 good questions that you have listed if they have not already been answered during the course of the interview. Those questions will really help show that you've done your homework. And then, of course, you want to close the deal. At the end of the interview, you want to thank them for their time and then reiterate why you're interested in the position, and then be sure to know what to expect or what to look forward to, what the next step of the interview process is. After the interview, you want to follow up. You want to send thank you notes to in a timely manner. And by timely, I do recommend within 24 hours. You can send a group email if you don't have the email addresses, the contact information for everyone that took part in the interview process. What you might want to do is send the thank you email to the person who coordinated the interview and thank them for all their help in setting things up and coordinating everything, but then asking them also if they might be able to provide you contact information for the other people that were involved in the interview. However you do this, always, 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 always send a thank you email. It's really amazing how many people don't send a thank you. And sometimes this can really be the deciding factor, especially if the job involves any kind of customer service. I also want to let you know that it's totally okay to check in when it's appropriate after the interview. So, for example, if they say we're going to be interviewing people this week, and then we hope to be back in touch with you and others by the middle of next week, and now it's Friday of next week, and you haven't heard anything back, it's completely okay to get back in touch with whoever you've been communicating with at the organization, and just say, hey, I wanted to check in. Really enjoyed the opportunity to interview last week, and just wanted to see where you were in the process. What you don't, however, want to say is, I want to know if you're going to hire me or what. You just want to very gently check in about their process and see if there's anything that you can add to any questions that they have, any questions that they have toward your candidacy. Um, because you know what, they may have every intention of getting back in touch with folks by the middle of that week, but other things came up and things got delayed a bit. So just because you have not heard back from them does not necessarily mean that you did not get the job. Right? So again, this was a lot of information, and I'm sure that you may have questions. That's very understandable. If you do, this is a look at our team. That's Donald Turner, director. I'm on top. Our assistant director is Jesse Orlando. Our career educators, Karen Bailey. Here's our contact information. Do feel free to reach out to us. Students and alumni, set up an appointment with us via Starfish. We'd love to hear from you. Also, please, I encourage you, drop any comments into the section below, especially if you have any recommendations for future seminars, future workshops. So again, you know what? Once again, I want to thank you. I know that all you guys are busy, and with everything else that's going on around us, thank you again for taking time out of your busy day to join us. Stay safe and take good care. We hope to hear from you soon.